One of the real treats of coming to the NFL Scouting Combine here in Indianapolis is seeing our old buddy Dane Brugler every year. Warms the heart, smile on the face
Pure
to see
joy.
you, buddy. One of our all-time favorites. It's great seeing you. For where you are in your process with the Beast, where are you right now, and what, if anything, do you take from this week?
This week is a big cross-checking exercise. It is a chance to, okay, all the hay's in the barn, all the work's been done, tape's been watched. Now, okay, let's see them back it up here at the Combine. So that's everything from the on-field stuff, see how they move in space, the drills, 40-yard dash, the position-specific drills, the gauntlet for receivers, the wave drill for offensive linemen, defensive linemen, just to see the way they move in space. And it's great here because what's different from the pro day is everybody's here doing it in repetition, so you have an immediate frame of reference.
Yeah.
If one guy does it really well or really poorly, then, okay, compare that to the next guy and the next guy. And so just that repetition and frame of reference is really helpful. And so, yeah, for me, it's just one big cross-checking exercise. If something doesn't match up with what the tape says, all right, we got to go back and do more homework, figure out, all right, what are we missing maybe? Obviously, the biggest part of this, the medicals, the interviews, for me, it's a chance to, I've talked with most of these players at this point, but fill in some gaps. Just try to, that's what the Beast is all about, right, is all the details and background stuff. And so trying to get as much of those little nuggets in there as possible is something that really important to me.
Yeah. Most interesting fact about a player that you've come across for this year's Beast?
Trey Harris, the receiver for Ole Miss, was Malik Neighbors' quarterback in high school. So they go back, and actually Trey Harris was going to focus on basketball. He was going to. I'm a basketball player now, not football.
So he's an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. But it was Malik Neighbors that said, "Hey, man, I need a quarterback. Like I know I'm good, but if I don't have a quarterback to get it to me," and so he kind of talked Trey to come back to the team, and he was his quarterback through the remainder, and then he made later at Louisiana Tech. Trey Harris made the switch to receiver, and then at Ole Miss, and so it worked out pretty good for both of them.
Where is he in the board? Is he a
He's a top 75 guy.
Okay.
I like him a lot. I mean, he's not a burner. He's not just going to run by guys.
So
but
day two, late day two.
He'll be somewhere on day two. Maybe, and this is a weird receiver class where it's in most years I feel like we're saying, all right, what's the strength of the draft? Oh, the receivers, the corners, the athletes. It feels like we have so many of those guys. This year, it's kind of the opposite where defensive line is the strength and receiver and corner is a little bit lighter. And so because of that, I wouldn't be surprised if Trey Harris goes top 40, even higher, just because teams want guys that can affect the scoreboard.
Yeah,
and they want.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look at last year. I think he might be probably better than a guy like Jalen Polk, and Jalen Polk went in the top 40 last year. And so if teams are really reaching for receiver help, won't be surprised at all if Harris goes pretty early.
I do this thing. I very rarely listen to other sports talk radio because I don't want something to get into my head.
Sure.
Even if it's not something that is intentional, but sometimes things slip in. Do you have that here where you are in your convictions and you don't kind of want to hear what other draft analysts have to say?
I mean, he was breaking bread with Greg
I know,
Cosell
that's
last night, so I'm sure things came up.
Because it's your conviction,
Sure.
right?
Well, and I'm not arrogant enough to think that I have all the answers. So, there's a handful of people that I trust in the media side that I will compare notes with. Greg Cosell being one of them. DJ, Daniel Jeremiah is one of them. Lance Zierlein I talked to quite a bit. Just texting back and forth, trading notes like, hey, did you see this with this guy? Or am I missing something? So I can count them on one hand, the number of people that I do that with. But, really it's more with scouts because I know, they've got so much on the line with these guys and they've done all the work. And so comparing notes with scouts, really helpful in my process just to make sure I'm not missing something that maybe I'm watching the wrong tape. And maybe, there's something in my process that I'm overlooking.
When you list off the people that you did, do you have certain people that you have found you like to get their takes on certain things? I know with Lance, for example, the
offensive line.
For sure. Is that something you've kind of cultivated to be like, all right, I want to check my receivers with this guy, I want to check my quarterbacks here, my lines there?
Yeah, no doubt. And offensive line, Lance for sure. Brandon Thorne does an outstanding job with offensive linemen. I'm still trying to find someone that I trust implicitly with quarterbacks. We've all got those misses, right?
We all are.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole
So,
league is.
If you know a quarterback whisperer, let me know, because I'd love to talk to him and kind of bend his ear a little bit, find out more, especially with this class where we're going to have to dig a little bit more with these quarterbacks, yeah.
And we're going to dive into that in a second, but I think it's always interesting for people to, because I'm sure you see anytime you post a mock draft or anytime you post, your big board or whatever whatever phrase you want to use, there's a lot of real strong conviction in your mentions from people who perhaps maybe have not spent the time that you have on it. For those amateurs who would like to, back some of their very strong takes up with tape, what's kind of a way that you would say kind of tape 101, how people can start to get into that world, and we'll stay with quarterbacks because I think obviously it's the Cleveland Browns show. We need a quarterback, so it's I think at top of mind. What are the things that you are watching for, and do you have a style? One thing somebody told me a long time ago when I did it was run the play, and I don't know if you have any little things like this or if you even think that this is a good thing, run the play just a few seconds so there maybe the receivers are 5 to 10 yards down the field, pause it. At that point, you've seen the coverage rotations. You know what the coverage is playing. You have an idea of the concepts, and you have an idea. You can say to yourself, okay, where should this ball go?
Yeah.
And then see if it actually does go there.
Right, exactly.
To kind of quarterback stuff, what are things that you do that people who want to kind of be more educated about this can do?
It's a smart way to look at it, and I first and foremost start with the opponent. Understanding what's the personnel like it. And more so than just like, okay, this team or this quarterback is facing Arizona State. Okay, was Arizona State any good on defense? And what are their corners like? What kind of coverage do they like to play? So getting an understanding before you go into the tape about what the quarterback, and it's kind of like what you're saying, like understanding what the quarterback is going to be facing from a talent perspective. Because, okay, if, a quarterback has 5 touchdowns against a certain defense, it's like, oh, wow, that looks great. But it turns out the defense isn't very good. And I don't know how much you're learning from that tape. So making sure you're watching, in a perfect world, you're watching every tape. But in a more condensed way of doing this, you're watching, especially with quarterbacks, 7, 8 tapes. But making sure you're paying attention to the ones that matter because they're facing a really good defense with good defenders, guys that will be playing at the next level. And then I like that the way you phrase that about how let the play run for a beat or two, roll it back, and then try to understand. Okay, based on this coverage, his eyes should be looking here, and that's the biggest obstacle when watching tape is we don't know the play call. We don't know what they've been coached to do.
On the progression, sure.
Exactly. And so, based off of first read, second read, they're easy to point out, like, oh, I should have got to a second read faster. You want to see guys eliminate things quickly when that first read is not there. But there are times where quarterbacks, the first read is actually over here, but he starts there to draw the safety. So there are just so many, and I've been doing this for 20 years at this point, but understanding the quarterback position from just a micro level where you get a better sense for what he's being asked to do is something that, we'll be trying to figure out through the end of time. Yeah. And so every year you feel like maybe you get a little bit better. You pick up on these different things, but it's a never-ending process that, I don't think there's no such thing as a true quarterback expert when it comes to these evaluations because it's college to pro is such a jump physically, mentally, just their personality, that when you factor in all those things, it just makes it a tough position to project.
Where do you come at, and when you're kind of going through your evaluations, because when you do watch these tapes, you can get a sense of a couple of things, and one would be traits, right?
Yeah.
Arm strength. How can they attack every blade of grass? What are their fundamentals within that? What is their athleticism? What's their escapability? What is their pocket presence? And then there's the other side that is kind of intangibles, and that is the decision-making, the instincts, the ability to throw with anticipation, the ability to understand very quickly what a coverage is doing, and then say, okay, process that, and that means the ball needs to go here, and then be able to physically do that. How do you kind of balance? Because it's a position where the reality is you need all of those, but that's Andrew Luck maybe.
Exactly.
There aren't a lot of those guys, so you have to say what matters ultimately more.
Every position you have in your mind a list of the key traits you're looking at for the position. And it's tough from my point of view because I'm doing this from a very general standpoint where, if I'm a Brown scout, obviously I have a certain scheme that I'm that I'm looking for, a certain culture that I'm looking for. So that changes things. But from a generalized standpoint, especially with quarterbacks, top 2 are non-negotiable. It's decision-making and accuracy. You need those two things. That's where you start. But sometimes you can maybe inflate that a little bit. Like Bryce Young was a good example of that, where worried about the size, the arm was fine, wasn't great, it wasn't terrible, it was fine. And so, but his decision making and his accuracy were so impressive at Alabama. It was like, you know what? Yeah, I really like C.J. Stroud, really like him. But Bryce Young's going to be my number one quarterback because he does the first two things so well. And then he gets to the NFL, and it's like, oh, man, if you don't have those other physical traits, it's so tough. And Bryce Young has gotten better and better. Like, it's taken a little bit of time as he kind of rebuilds his confidence. Yeah. And I think he's going to be fine.
He seems like he's in a good spot now.
Yeah, he's in. It took a little bit of time just because I think he got beat down and because of the situation in Carolina, too. But not having those physical traits, you really miss that. And so it's something to consider as you try to weigh, okay, yeah, he has accuracy, has decision-making, but does he have the necessary arm where it fits within the way he likes to play? So it might be a segment or a
no, that's a perfect
Shedeur,
segue into Shedeurs, right? So you're talking about, and it's perfect. And we know people who have been following you who know for sure Cam Ward is the top quarterback on your board in this draft, and you're not as high on Shedeur as some others might be. But I would imagine that impacts you, right? You go back to your notes and you say, well, here's what I thought really was going to translate right away for Bryce Young, and then it didn't as well. Now, I think in some offenses, and I think if we're talking, Shanahan, McVay, Stefanski, those traits, I think, can overcome others just because of the way that things are schemed up for a quarterback. You look at the success Brock Purdy's had, obviously,
no doubt,
in San Francisco. But that you're looking more scheme agnostic as opposed to into it. And then there's the argument, right, or the debate. Do you want the best ball of clay, which you're 100% sure is Cam Ward in your mind, and then you coach that into your scheme or modify it to fit what he does best, or are you looking for the person whose best attributes match what your scheme asks them to be?
Right, and you better be convinced that the guy that has the flashier traits, like a Cam Ward, that he's smart enough and wired the right way to do it. And all the feedback I've gotten on Cam Ward is he absolutely fits that in terms of his intelligence. I had one scout say of all these quarterbacks, he has the biggest chip on his shoulder, with just the way that he attacks. And then I think you feel optimistic about, okay, wing T quarterback in high school, goes to Incarnate Word, leads the FCS in passing touchdowns, goes to Washington State, gets better, and then he goes to Miami, and he had this tremendous season where he Heisman contender, production was outstanding. Wasn't perfect, but it was well above average. So it's like, okay, I feel good about who he is now, but he's continuing to ascend. We're getting him on the up. And so where is he going to be 2 years from now, 3 years from now, when we get a chance, our coaches get our hands on him and really figure him out? So that's why, to me, Cam Ward, if I had a bet on a quarterback in this class, regardless of scheme and what exactly my offense looks like with personnel, Cam Ward would be the guy I would bet on.
And you'd be comfortable taking him early.
So the one follow-up I wanted to have with that on Cam was this. Puts himself in the draft process last year. Doesn't like – he was in. He was going. And doesn't like what he hears.
4th-round pick.
Yeah. Goes to Miami. So what changed for him on the field when you compare Washington State – because the ball of clay is the same. It was the same ball of clay at Washington State. What changed from Washington State Cam to Miami Cam?
The number one thing is just the – avoiding negative plays, and he still does. Like, you watch the Cal tape, you watch almost every tape, he's gonna put the ball in harm's way in a way that he needs to reel back on that. But at Washington State, it was running himself into way too many sacks. It was putting the ball in harm's way, turnover-worthy plays. He really cut back on that and was able to play more with what the defense is giving him, not force something that wasn't there. And so that's just part of any quarterback's maturation.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to say it and say, oh, he'll get better, he'll mature. It's another thing to see it on the field. So I think Cam Ward is a good example of, he could have gone to the draft. And, Jaden Daniels, if he came out after his 3rd year or 4th year, he would have been a 4th-round pick. But he goes to LSU and, he takes another step and turns into the top 2 pick, and obviously had the rookie year he did. Not saying Cam Ward's going to have that same trajectory, but there's something to be said. I know age matters. I know, for some teams more than others, you want younger guys. I get it, but at quarterback, give me the guy with the experience. And it's unique year where the top 2 guys, both Shedeur and Cam, are. Cam's a 5-year guy, but Shedeur's a 4-year guy.
They played a lot.
They played a lot of football where it's. maybe he's not 21 years old, but give me the experience. Look at what Bo Nix did last year. Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix had, when he got on the field, had success because of the experience that he had in college. So if we're talking running back, sure, give me the 20-year-old. If we're talking quarterback, give me the guy with the on-field experience. And this is a unique class where there's questions, but at least these guys at the top all have that experience.
There's no doubt, and that's a great question about just kind of the evolution of how these evaluations go and kind of where you get to. So you like Cam a lot. Do you think one of the things, obviously when I was going through my notes on Cam and watching the tapes, Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and what they have done, I would imagine, for your profession and just the league in general is it used to be if you didn't understand their base, you didn't understand their footwork,
right.
You didn't understand their arm angles, or perhaps sometimes they appeared nonchalant and drifting and this and that. It was that was a red flag, right? It was like, well, that's not going to work at the NFL because so much was under center, so much was dependent on the drop back matching and the timing and all that. Now you see that I bet you don't even think twice about it. You're like, that's just his style, and it works. It can. Right. We've seen that it can work.
Creation, yeah, it's become a part of the quarterback position. We talked about this last year with Caleb, because he had a little bit of that to him where, okay, are we drafting him for how he wins from the pocket, or are we drafting him because he can make fun plays? And you know what? Part of the NFL is 60% of the time, the play does not go exactly how you expect it to go. And so your quarterback has to be able to find plan B, plan C. Sometimes that means leaving the pocket. Sometimes it means stepping up and creating an extra half beat so the route can come open. So it is not quite as simple as, okay, can he make the throw? Can he, like Kyle McCord is a really good quarterback in this draft, outstanding from the pocket, but I worry about the mobility and can he create? And because of that, teams are kind of, they like him more in the third round, fourth round because they worry about the creation aspect, which has become such a big part of today's NFL.
How do you, with a guy like Shedeur, who Pat Shurmur, obviously coordinator,
right.
A pretty porous offensive line, and an indifference to the run game. How do you balance what he is trying to do to have success at Colorado and trying to win games there and what was on him to win games there versus when things go right in their scheme and it's drop and it's out? 74% completion percentage this year, so obviously he's incredibly accurate.
Right.
How do you balance those things when you think about, we talked about the hero ball, the drifting, all of that stuff. How do you find the happy medium on all that?
And it's why quarterback's so difficult to evaluate because of all these guys are asked to do so many different things within their own offense. And at Colorado, all those things are true about the offensive line, lack of the run game. And because of that, he had 74% completions, but he also had one of the highest rates of throws within 10 yards. And so, 74%. But if you eliminate that, if you take away all screens, the highest completion percentage in college football this year was Will Howard. So, it's just interesting. And Shedeur is still up there. He was somewhere in the top 10. So it's not like he free fell. But you take away the screens, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, maybe he's the 74% doesn't look as impressive with a downfield offense. And he's made downfield throws. It's not like you're worried about can he really push the ball. But trying to scout a player independent of what he is asked to do is the challenge.
Yeah.
You have to divorce him from the situation and say, okay, how is this going to fit with what we want to do? And it's different from scheme to scheme, but I think Shedeur will be liked a little bit more by some teams, not as much by others. My big question with Shedeur is, can he elevate everybody around you and really throw everybody on your back and go win games? That's where I have kind of a little bit of a question mark. Is he a truck or a trailer? I think he's more of a trailer than a true truck. Not to say he can't start. He can. He can start in the NFL, and I think he's a first-round pick. I think he'll start in the NFL. Just not quite what I'd be looking for in a top 5 pick myself.
So with that all being said, if you're put yourself in Andrew Berry's shoes, you're sitting at 2. And you and I both remember the year 2016. You were sitting at 2 behind the Tennessee Titans. And in that draft, for the Browns anyway, and I can say this with authority, Jared Goff was it.
Yeah.
There were 2 quarterbacks that year as well as Goff and Carson Wentz. They were not into Carson Wentz. They were into Jared Goff. No way Tennessee's taking a quarterback. They just drafted Mariota. And then the Rams trade up. Browns don't. End up moving around. We know how that draft went. End up with Corey Coleman in the first round. If you're that convicted about Cam, then do you just say, let's figure it out and let's get to one and let's not have to worry about anything?
Yeah. You have the conversations, at the very least. You find out, okay, what's the price? What are we talking? Are we talking about 2 3s? Are we talking about a 2 and a 3? What type of price would it take to move up from 2 to 1? Because a lot of it will depend on other offers they're getting. It's not necessarily, it's just one pick. Well, what are the Giants offering?
Yeah.
What are the Raiders offering? And that will obviously inflate the price. New general manager in Tennessee. Titans, I really do believe the Titans are going to trade out of 1. They don't have a 3rd-round pick. They pick it like in the early 30s, and then they don't pick until like the 4th round. So it's a big gap that I know the new general manager wants to add more picks, kind of build up that roster with the way that he sees it. What is that going to look like, though? What type of trade offer are they willing to accept? But at the very least, you find that out. You figure out what is it going to cost to move up, and then that's when you kind of go back to your brain trust and figure out if it's worth it or not.
Yeah, it is such a subjective thing, and you were talking earlier about the Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud thing.
Right.
What is an example of a guy who you had a strong feeling on, and then it got to the league? And so much of this is circumstances, right? Like the situation. I mean, that's 90% of it.
Yes.
Are you in a position to succeed once you land there?
If the Bears drafted Mahomes instead of Trubisky, and Trubisky goes to the Chiefs, what do those 2 careers look like?
Of course, sliding doors is
fascinating.
crazy.
What
Yeah.
because coaching and the circumstances, situation, all of that factors in so much for a quarterback, no doubt.
Is there a guy though that landed in a good spot that didn't turn into what you thought that he would be? And conversely, is there a guy who landed in a great spot and was significantly better than you thought he would be?
I mean, are you asking if I've had misses at quarterback? Because the answer is yes.
I
very
know.
much so.
No, I just and I'm curious then how you apply that to the process. Everybody has them.
Yeah,
there's
no
no hit
doubt.
rate. This is a completely subjective process. And the thing that we've talked about is there's no sure thing at defensive end.
No sure thing
There's
anywhere.
no sure thing at corner or receiver. There's misses all over the place.
The words "sure thing" should
It
never
doesn't
be uttered
exist.
when it comes to the draft.
No.
I mean, last year's a good example with Bo Nix.
Yeah.
Bo Nix, and I thought he could start in the league, but I didn't think that he would lead the Broncos to the playoffs in year 1.
Yeah.
Now, again, you talk about circumstances and coaching. Getting paired up with Sean Payton, that matters. Turns
Helps.
out Sean Payton knows a thing or two about quarterbacks. So, and it was funny because during that draft, it was like the initial shock was, oh, man, Bo Nix went 12. Wow. And then it's like, oh, Sean Payton. All right, yeah, I might be wrong on this one because Sean Payton knows what he's doing.
I'm going to give you a funny story about that. This was so early in the process. It was now or maybe even earlier in the year.
Yeah.
I had a buddy who he's in like medical sales, was at some conference, sits down with a lady who happens to be the wife of somebody like well up the personnel side.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, oh, yeah, we're drafting Bo Nix. So he texted me. This was like January
That's right.
of that year. And he's like, Broncos are taking Bo Nix, 100%. And then they did. And we were like, Jimmy Bang Bang had it. He had
Nailed it, yeah.
He had it all along. So you never know sometimes
never know.
where the intel will come. And I'm happy that didn't
That's
derail
funny.
their plans because I think that might have caused a little bit of strife. But
Yeah.
the good news is it worked out there. But, yeah, it is interesting. It's everything. We know that there are no sure things. And I love how you said that in a draft. And we've been saying the sure thing in the NFL is if without a quarterback you cannot win. Period. The end.
I kind of like the idea in this class of
I want 2 of them.
well,
we do.
we rarely see guys more. Like it's only happened once in the last 7 years. We have more day 2 quarterbacks than day 1 quarterbacks. Because usually, if you're good enough to play in the NFL, you're going in round 1. But this year, I think is a little unique with Jackson Dart, and Tyler Shuck, and Jalen Milroe is a little more of a wild card. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if we have more day 2 quarterbacks than day 1. And I don't know. I like the idea of if I can get Tyler Shuck in the early 3rd round, I would rather do that. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, then but I'd rather do that than take Shador at 2. That's my own person. Even though like I have Shador rated higher than Tyler Shuck.
Sure.
But getting him in the early 3rd because he's 26, going to be a 26-year-old rookie and all of that. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't, then it's a 3rd-round pick's not going to stop me from drafting a quarterback early next year. So, but will Shuck make it that long? I don't know. A lot of teams like him.
Let's go down this road for a second, then we're going to get the final question, which I love because we want to talk weapons here.
Okay.
But if Cam Ward is off the table for you're running the Browns, Cam Ward's off the table, you're a 2, are you taking somebody or then are you in full let's try to get whatever we can get mode? from an asset standpoint.
Yeah, you definitely. I think you would love to move back. Now, the opportunity to draft the best non-quarterback in the draft is pretty appealing, whether that's Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. Hunter, you plug him into this offense, all of a sudden you have an immediate guy with juice. It's going to be an interesting thing here with Hunter as teams talk to him and really kind of boil down, hey, where do you want to play? Of course, he's going to say both, but teams are going to really press him and say, okay, well, let's just for a second say you can't play both. You have to play one. Which would you rather play? And it'll be interesting to see how those conversations play out. I think most teams that I talk to like him as a corner, full-time corner, and then you mix in some plays on offense. But I know other teams want that juice on offense.
Well, Brown said
they said
Brown's
very
probably being right, and I get
receiver.
it. And you watch any Shador tape, and inevitably you see Travis Hunter going and making plays. And so the chance to add that, drop that into your offense, would be pretty appealing. It'd be tough to trade away from that. So it would depend. You're going to leave the phone lines open. You're going to see what you could get. But it would be tough to trade away from either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, whichever one the Browns have higher on the board.
So let's just say we're running things, and we're going to listen to you, but we're going to still take Shador at 2.
Okay.
We'll take Shuck in the 3rd round. Now at pick 33, who are your favorite weapons in that range? The Browns have 3 picks in the 3rd round as well. Give us some guys. In my mind, and I've already said it, I want 2 quarterbacks. I want a receiver, a running back, and another tight end. That's what I want out of those top 5. We want weapons. We want to score the football here on the CBD Browns.
That's music to my ears, yeah. I said how this is not a great receiver group. It'll be interesting to see how many go in the first. Is it T-Mac will go, probably Burden will go, I think Igbuka will go. It's Matthew Golden, maybe not. I think
From Texas. Yep.
Yeah, if Matthew Golden is there, I like that fit a lot. He's not the biggest, not necessarily the fastest, but just a dang good receiver. He will go up and get the football. His routes got better and better every year. I think there's, even though I don't like the 40's good, not great, there's an explosive nature, so he can uncover. He's a guy that doesn't need he doesn't have a receiver on his hip constantly because he knows how to get open. So if Matthew Golden is there in the early second, I like that fit a lot. This is such a deep running back group. It's loaded. Obviously, Ashton Genty gets most of the attention, and he should. He's unbelievable. You could argue he's the best player in the draft. But it's not like the running back, it just falls off. Like Omarion Hampton and Caleb Johnson are tremendous. Travion Henderson is more of the you want him more of an electric committee back.
Is he like Gibbs?
He's like Gibbs, but I think what makes Gibbs so special, aside from just the burst, is he's so good at reading the offensive line. He understands football geometry. He understands where Travion's not quite like that. Where he watches tape, and as an inside runner, wish he had a little more patience here. Wish he didn't run into his own blocker here. But if you give him a lane, he's going to scoot. He's going to go. And so Travion's more of that electric. Yeah, you try to capture that Jahmyr Gibbs in a bottle type of thing. So yeah, he would be really good in that situation. Tight end, this is like running back is loaded. I love Colston Loveland. I love Tyler Warren at the top. I don't think it's a debate between those two. It's just a preference. Do you want the upside guy? Do you want the guy that's just a dang good football player in Tyler Warren? Both those guys are going to be NFL stars. But then after that, I love Elijah Arroyo.
When I watched the Cam tape, I remember I told him, I was like,
go with the 2 Hurricane
I like this tight end. Yeah,
offense.
go 12 personnel. Let's go.
But Mason Taylor's awesome. Mason Taylor just does everything.
Yep.
And exactly what you would expect from Jason Taylor's kid. None of these guys they're more pass catchers and blockers, but they can get the job done. And I'm a big Gunnar Helm fan too. Gunnar Helm, I think he's the 5th tight end of the 5, but he's
what about Gibbe's boy from Bowling Green?
Bowling Green, are they FCS or?
Shots fired at Gibby.
Wow.
Oh my God,
man.
Hey, look.
Ouch.
Fannon's a Northeast Ohio kid, so I like Fannon a lot.
It just goes right for the
by the way,
respect.
Come back anytime.
Anytime
Come back
you want.
anytime.
Yeah, we like that.
Absolutely.
That's very good.
Fannon's a Northeast Ohio kid, so I'm always going to root for those kids. How do you argue with 117 catches? I don't care what level you're playing at. I don't care what conference you're playing in. He's more of the little undersized H-back. What is he? But he does 2 things really well. He's straight line explosive, and he catches the ball no matter what. And, okay, I can work with guys like that. So, yeah, he'll go somewhere on day 2 and be a good player. He's 20 years old. He hasn't turned 21 until July.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Great talking to you, buddy.
The best.
You're the best.
Now the combine can start.
That's right. We've done it. Yeah.
It's
official.
It's underway.
It's official.
The great Dane Brugler. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks, guys.